Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. I am Joe, and I'm your host every Tuesday evening right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 AM, and you can catch us streaming 24/7 at WNRI.com. This show is rebroadcast every Saturday at 1 o'clock, so if you can't hear us live on Tuesday evening, you can check us out Saturdays at 1 p.m. And again, that's either on 99.9, 1380, or at WNRI.com, wherever you are. That way, even if you're not in the greater Woonsocket area, Northern Rhode Island, Southern Massachusetts, you can still listen to WNRI. All right, a little about me. I'm a realtor. I've been a realtor since the year 2006. I work with buyers and sellers of residential and commercial properties. Very fortunate. We've had past several years. It's been a good industry to be involved in, and I enjoy helping people with the largest financial transaction of their lives, buying and selling real estate, buying and selling a home. Sometimes things pop up in the economy and the headlines that get everybody all worked up. And if you have questions tonight about or thoughts that you'd like to share about what we're going to talk about, the number to call in at is 401-769-0600. Or if you're not in the 401 area code, it's 1-800-949-9674. That's 1-800-949-9674. All right, let's get to it. So, mortgage interest rates, they've trended up a little bit. The 30-year fixed rate, 6.38, which is flat from yesterday. Okay, that has not gone up, but it's a little bit higher than it was last week and the week before. The 30-year FHA and VA is 6% even. Okay. There's a 15-year fixed interest rate mortgage, which is 5.86. So I want to point out, a conventional 15-year, 5.86. A conventional 30-year, 6.38. The longer the term, the higher the rate is. Okay? And I wanted to talk about that because it's been a hot item in the real estate world the past several days because President Trump floated the idea of a 50-year mortgage, 50-year mortgage. Okay. Traditionally, people get a 30-year mortgage when they buy a home. We have actually had 40-year mortgages in the marketplace, but no one offers them. They don't market them. And like the difference between a 15-year mortgage and a 30-year mortgage, the longer term, the higher the interest rate. So, 50-year mortgages are not currently available. However, if they were, presumably, once again, the rate would be higher. So if we've got a 6.38 for a 30-year fixed rate, a 50-year mortgage would be somewhat higher. Okay, the 30-year is twice as long as a 15-year, and it's about, 0.14 and 3. It's about a half a point higher. Okay, so if we were to say increasing the 30-year to 50 years, okay, not quite doubling it, maybe it would go up another half a point. So you'd be at a 6.88, say 6.9, high sixes. And of course, the big difference is that loan is amortized. Okay, the payback is stretched out over a term of 50 years as opposed to 30 years. So what that means is every month when you make your payment on a 50-year mortgage, a greater percentage of it for a longer period of time is going to be going towards the interest, because banks who provide money for long mortgages, all of the interest is paid off up front, and you don't work on the interest until the end of the term of the loan. So everybody says, well, 50 years, that's ridiculous. People aren't going to stay in a house for 50 years. Well, newsflash, most people don't stay in their house for 30 years. In fact, most people don't stay in their house for 15 years. The average time people move It's increasing now a little bit, but it's still closer to 10 years than it is to 15 or 20 or 30. So if someone gets a 50-year mortgage, it's unlikely that they will stay there for the term of the loan. Additionally, they've had 50-year mortgages in Japan, so it's not like this is the first time they've ever existed. Now, I share the sentiments of Dr. Lawrence Yun, who's the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, and I'm going to share with you his thoughts, okay? Would I recommend a 50-year mortgage, in my case, to my daughter, who is currently a renter, which she is? Trying to build up equity with a 50-year mortgage would be a crawl, and fully owning the property free and clear will literally last almost a lifetime. Okay, now just for perspective, the median age for home buyers is now 40 years old. Okay, so if you were buying a home getting a 50-year mortgage, you'd pay it off when you're 90. All right, which exceeds the expected life expectancy in this country. So the interest rate on a, as I said a moment ago, 50-year mortgage would even be higher than on a 30-year mortgage. All of that being said, higher interest rate, longer term, would I recommend my daughter get a mortgage buy a house with a 50-year mortgage? Well, it's going to be a lower monthly payment, though not much. It'll only be a little bit lower. That may be just enough to make a difference in qualifying ratios for a mortgage. Next, and this is a big one, folks, mortgage payments are fixed for the term of the loan. So your payment, your housing payment, would remain consistent for 50 years. 50. Okay? If you're renting today, I guarantee you that if your rent doesn't go up next year, it will probably go up the year after. The reason for that is because the cost of owning a property increases. Insurances increase, taxes increase. Landlords, sewer fees, water fees, all increase. Code enforcement issues increase cash outlays for landlords. So those get passed on to the tenant. Okay? When you own your home, your mortgage payment is fixed for the term of the loan. Next, home price gains, which no one talks about when they're dismissing 50-year mortgages, are automatic, equity independent of the mortgage balance. Okay, so the house can increase in value regardless of your mortgage balance. So let's just say you buy a $400,000, you get a $400,000 mortgage, and let's use $350,000. Okay, and if you get a $350,000 mortgage, and the house increases in value, okay, your payment is still going to be based on that. The increase in the value of the home, the market value of the home, goes to your net worth. So if you sell the home, even if you're selling it, let's say, in less than 10 years, and you really haven't made a dent in the equity balance of your mortgage, the appreciation, the increase in equity accumulation, will increase your net worth. If you were renting for that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you moved out of your apartment and went to buy a house or do something, you would have nothing to show for the housing payment for the previous 5, 6, 7, or 8 years. In all likelihood, your home will increase in value in that period. Okay, looking back over the past 80 years, even factoring the greatest downturn in home values in history, okay, in the early 2000s, the Great Recession, even factoring that in, residential real estate increases on average over 10% per year. Okay, now sometimes it goes up to 18, 20%, sometimes it's only 4 or 5%. But it continues to increase in value. Okay, so that's something else that is a better step. This this mortgage product is not for everyone. Definitely not for everyone. But it could serve the purpose for a lot of consumers and could make the difference between creating family wealth or not. Okay. Additionally, you can also pay more to your mortgage balance, say if you get a pay raise or a bonus at the end of the year, and thereby pay off the mortgage in less than 50 years if you wanted to. Okay? And trading up to a new home after a few years, is one thing. And then you could also, when rates come down, refinance out of the 50-year mortgage into a 30-year mortgage, or a 20-year mortgage, or a 15-year mortgage. Okay? So the 50-year mortgage should not be quickly dismissed as out of line, as crazy, not something good for everyone. Okay, I think that we really need to pay attention, because while it may not be right for most of us, there are many consumers out there who it may make a lot of sense for. If you're a young couple, you've got a couple of kids, or maybe you want to have a couple of kids, and you're paying rent, and you're paying $2,500, $3,000, $3,500 a month in rent. If you could slide over and send that same amount of money to the bank on a mortgage payment, it would make a heck of a lot of sense. Okay? So I think we need to further reflect on the 50-year mortgage, recognizing that it's not for everyone. There are pros, there are definitely cons, but something else that I want to talk about next I think is really good. Finally, my big, personally, as a real estate professional, objection to the 50-year mortgage right now in general is it's going to make housing an option, buying a home, for more people. We already have too many buyers. So what would happen is we bring a bunch more buyers in, excuse me, even if it's 1 or 2 or 3%, a low number like that, that could serve to increase prices even more. Again, supply and demand. So if we have more demand than we have supply, that could create a problem. But something that could help with the supply problem is the portable mortgage. This is something else that was floated by Pulte, Secretary Pulte, and it's kind of another variation of the assumable mortgage. An assumable mortgage is one that can remain with the home after a seller has sold it and moved on. The buyer takes over, assumes the mortgage under the original terms and rate, and makes the same monthly payment as the original owner for the remaining months on that loan. Excuse me. So imagine you could assume a 30-year mortgage, fixed rate, and it was originated in January of 2021. Okay, you might have a rate on that mortgage of 2.65. This is according to data from Freddie Mac. That's very different from current mortgage rates, which as of today are 6.38. But assuming a loan, it's not that easy, because there is most likely, I can assure you, a gap between the value of the home today and the balance on the mortgage being assumed. So if the value in that home in 2021 was $350,000 and the mortgage balance is $300,000, today that home could be worth $450,000 and the mortgage could have been paid down to $280,000. So there's a gap between the fair market value of the home, $450,000, and the value of the mortgage, $280,000. That gap is $170,000. So, how can you buy that home when assuming the mortgage? You'd have to get a second mortgage, which in my example would be for, let's say, $125,000. And then you'd have to come up with $45,000 of cash, which is 10% of the purchase price. Okay. Well, Joe, but wait, we can buy houses now with 3.5% down or no money down. Well, yes, you can. However, in this particular situation, you would not be getting a purchase mortgage. You would be applying for a second mortgage, which is subordinate, which is lower in priority to the first mortgage, which was $280,000 at that rate of 2.65%. So you'd be paying a loan off with an interest rate of 2.65% with a principal balance of $280,000. You'd be paying a second loan every month with a principal balance of $125,000, and that probably will have a rate of at least 6.38, maybe even higher based on today's rates. Now, maybe the buyer has a big savings account and they can just write the check out for $170,000 and don't need to have a second mortgage. That would be great. Okay. But in the example, if you were to get a 20-year term for that second mortgage, okay, the payment for principal and interest would be $930 per month. Okay. So that's a way to increase inventory, because now someone will sell the house that has an assumable mortgage that they would not have otherwise sold. Okay. However, that person still has to go out and qualify for a mortgage of the 6.38% that we have today. All right, now sellers must be careful, because even when someone assumes the mortgage, the seller may still be liable for the mortgage even after the sale, unless the creditors expressly release them from the mortgage. So that's kind of a little, fly in the ointment. Buyers must also consider the benefits of assumable mortgage, where the mortgage only covers a portion of the purchase price, because they still have to get their own mortgage to cover the rest. Sometimes, not all the time, it may be cheaper and more practical just to get one mortgage, apply for one mortgage to cover the whole thing. Okay. But that's something that may be considered, just in case you're not familiar, how the mortgage, how the government might improve assumable mortgages if we were to try and make this more of a marketing tool to get more homes on the market. But the government could do, bear with me as I flip through my notes, make loans to comply with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's rules assumable. So Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and FHA and VA and USDA can create low-cost top-up loans to bridge the gap between the existing mortgage's balance and the home purchase price. So that's second mortgage that I referred to earlier. Maybe Fannie Mae, okay, the federal government, FHA, VA, USDA would get involved, so there would not be a big jump in the interest rate. So instead of that second mortgage being a conventional, it could also be an FHA mortgage. Okay. What's important here is education. Consumers need to be educated. Real estate agents, mortgage professionals, everybody needs to know about the pros and cons of assumable mortgage to help bring them into the mainstream. A perfect example is there is a 40-year mortgage out there, but no one talks about it. It's like a big secret. I don't know any lenders who are writing those loans right now. Okay. So it would take kind of a full court press. The government, real estate agents, mortgage lenders, everybody would have to increase awareness, and make it easier to happen. I mean, again, I don't know that this would really be a good time for this to really make a big push for assumable mortgages. I don't know that they would really help that many buyers. And again, what we need to do is to help sellers, help builders. We need more inventory. Anything we can do to increase inventory should definitely be looked at. Okay, and that is something that we need to really pay attention to, because you know, if we started building houses, I talked about this last week, as fast as possible today, it would take over 10 years to build our way out of the deficit that we have. And that's assuming that the demand stays the same, which it may not, because there are 9 million adults between the age of 18 and 34 who are living at home, air quotes, and at some point every year some of those folks are going to decide they want to buy a home. So that will be more buyers coming into the pool of, to add to the demand. So that's assumable mortgages. What about portable mortgages? Okay, portable mortgages are something else that was floated by Pulte, and I think that these are much more realistic. I would support something like this because this will help increase supply, which is what we need. What I need to do is do a shout out to my sponsors, Anthony Betancourt at Compass Title and Escrow. Anthony will be on the show next week as a guest. They do a great job taking care of our buyers and sellers. They're very good at identifying potential problems ahead of time, which is really important in a real estate transaction because surprises are never good. So if we can identify a potential surprise early on and not a week before closing, get it straightened out early on. That way we do not have to extend the closing, because that creates a problem for everyone. Okay. Compass Title and Escrow, we refer all of our buyers and sellers to use them. They're right here in Lincoln, Rhode Island. Also, Vern Rainville. Vern is licensed by the state of Rhode Island to be a public insurance adjuster. That means he helps the property owner, not the insurance company, when the property owner needs to file a claim. Okay. Vern Rainville, 484-300-8495. Again, 484-300-8495. If you have a claim, think you'll have a claim, give him a call. We've had a lot of wind the past several days, gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Everything gets blown all around my yard. If you had any damage from the wind, give Vern a call, 484-300-8495. Leave a message. He returns all calls within 24 hours. He's a Rhode Island guy, background in construction, so he knows how to look for potential damage that could mean the insurance company would have to pay you more and not less. When the insurance company advertises that they come out the same day and cut you a check the same day, that sounds great, but the reason that sounds great is because, and why they do it, is because you can't do a kind of a deep forensic dive to determine where all the damage is, or if it's going to get worse as time goes on. You see these hurricanes and these water disasters down south in the middle of the summer, and if they go out there and they say, oh, here's your damage, and they cut you a check on day one, well, if you can't get the damage repaired right away because there are no contractors, there's no materials, whatever the reason is, the roads are washed out, that damage, now you could start to have mold problems, or you could start to have other issues that could compromise the integrity of your home. Okay? So you do not want to accept a check right away and then sign on the bottom line basically saying that you're all set. Vern Rainville can guide you through that, but you have to give him a call, 484-300-8495. because he'll give you the guidance you need so that you are not taken advantage of by the insurance company. Okay? And we all know insurance companies make a lot of money. Um, so if you can do anything to make sure that you are compensated everything that you are due based on your policy, you should certainly take advantage of that. All right, getting back to portable mortgages. Now, this is something new. Portable mortgage allows buyers to transfer the loan on an existing home to their next one. It's almost like the opposite of an assumable mortgage, because now that low interest rate helps the seller rather than the buyer. Okay? So if we needed more buyers, then the assumable mortgage would be helpful. The portable mortgage, let's in that same example, okay, the loan was from 2020, and the interest rate was 2.65. So you bought that house for $400,000, $500,000. Your interest rate is 2.65. You want to sell it and get a bigger house or a smaller house today, but rates are 6.38 or 6 flat. Cheapers, if I have to get rid of my rate of 2.65, that's a big jump. Well, if you could take that mortgage, so let's say you still owe $280,000 from house number one, you apply that balance on the price of the new house. So if you're buying a $600,000 home, you now have, the bank will give you $280,000 for the new house. House number one is sold. The bank gets their $280,000 from that one. They give the buyer $280,000 on the new one under the same terms, 2.65. Okay. The gap between that $280,000, the purchase price, and any amount that the buyer is putting down for a down payment, that would be a second mortgage. Okay, so this is something, it's already available in the UK, according to Forbes, and most lenders offer this service, allowing borrowers to port to carry their residential mortgage when they move, as long as you meet as a buyer the eligibility and affordability criteria. Okay, so your ratios still have to match. You still have to be able to qualify for that mortgage. Okay, your credit is still going to need to be good. You still have to have the income coming in. Now, presumably, hopefully, you're earning more money today than you were when you purchased the house. So you should be more qualified, and hopefully no calamities happened that compromised your credit, so you don't have a lower credit score, because that could really kind of, make things get problematic. So this is something lenders may not like this. They may be a little resistant to this because they rely a lot on what's called churn in sales and purchases of homes for much of their income. So it's likely to take some strong government intervention to basically cajole lenders to make the changes necessary to allow for portable mortgages so they're more mainstream in the United States. Okay. It's not smooth sailing. It's not easy peasy for the consumer either. Okay. Porting a mortgage, again, would require the borrower to make a new mortgage application. The lender will apply the same, as I said, stringent financial requirements that they apply to all of the other mortgage applications. So you need to make sure your credit stays higher, at the same level or higher than it was when you qualified for the mortgage. And again, as I said, there would be that gap between the purchase price, the balance on mortgage number one, and your down payment, and that would be the amount that the borrower would need to cover the gap using a home equity line of credit or a second mortgage. Okay. Now, the future for assumable and portable mortgages, there are definitely some advantages to streamlining both of those processes, and ease the housing crisis would be a good thing. Easing the housing crisis has a stated policy by the administration. Um, but a subject for discussion would be: will it help? Will it make a difference? Is it too little, too late? Okay, let's put assumable mortgages aside, because again, they're going to exacerbate the existing problem, and we'll say the same thing with the 50-year mortgage. Let's put it aside, because these are going to just increase the ability for more people to qualify for a mortgage, which pushes prices higher. Okay. Um, Neither of these is likely to, to really help the home buyers too much. Um, Legislators and the administration in D.C., so the Trump administration and Congress, would be the subject to intense lobbying from powerful real estate and mortgage entities. That could result in no changes, okay, because the banks, they're not going to want this, or it would be watered down. So it would look good on the outside, but, the final analysis, if it's something they make a change, but then it doesn't work for 98% of the consumers out there, it's really not going to do to make any difference. Okay, so it would take a lot of intestinal fortitude, let's say, for Congress and the White House to push this through for the little guy, for consumers. All right. I was talking with someone at a networking event Friday night, and this individual is decidedly, not a fan of the current administration. And I was saying, they're doing this to help the little guy. And this person was like, yeah, but they never really help the little guy. Whatever they do only helps the rich people. I didn't want to get into a discussion, because the big beautiful bill clearly has done a lot and will be doing even more to help the little guy, us. Okay. That being said, already some of the same bodies are responding sharply to the proposal to introduce, as I said earlier, the 50-year mortgage, which is the one that's gotten the most, the most coverage, and a lot of people have have come out and spoken against the 50-year mortgage. But I think that the thing we need to really be talking about is the portable mortgage, okay? Because while the 50-year mortgage could be helpful to some people, some consumers, it would help the wrong consumer. We need to help the homeowner so they can sell homes to increase inventory, okay? We don't need to subsidize home demand. We need to focus on increasing home supply. Otherwise, we're just going to push home prices even higher, which will make the housing affordability problem worse. The only way to fix the housing crisis is to increase the supply of homes. So we need to increase the supply of not just single-family homes, but we need to increase the supply of condominiums. We need to increase the supply of rental homes. Rents are insane in many areas. When you look at, we have 39 municipalities in this state, and none of them have affordable rents or home prices right now based on what people are earning in those municipalities. So how are we selling homes? Well, while we're selling homes is we're intergenerational living. That's a big thing. More people are working. So the husband and the wife, or two people, will be working in the household, maybe bringing in the grandparents with Social Security or retirement income. Accessory dwelling units make that easier. We talked about those a few weeks ago. Okay. That's kind of like an end-around way to increase the supply. You're not building an entirely new home, but you're building essentially an in-law, a family unit on the property. So there are relaxed setback requirements, etc. Okay. Folks, you're listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI, 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial, and of course, streaming 24/7 at WNRI.com. You can listen to us 24 hours a day, anywhere on the planet. Just have to go to WNRI.com and hear what we have to say right there. All right, so some other news in the real estate market. Let's see what we have here at Realtor.com. Realtor.com has the most accurate data out there of all of the national websites. Let's see. Some news. Nantucket home at the center of a tree cutting lawsuit sells for $2 million below asking price. Okay, let's see. Yeah, nothing major in the news for real estate right now from Realtor.com. You know, celebrity news. I don't like to really get involved with that too much, because celebrity news has to do with celebrities, not with what we deal with here, like I call in the street. You know, the small guy, the little guy. Okay, but celebrity news doesn't. So Trump, yes. Okay, here's some news. The Trump administration. Let's see. He defends the 50-year mortgage plan as, quote, not a big deal, after backlash, furious backlash from his MAGA base. So he's discounting the backlash, which I think he should. I think the objections to the 50-year mortgage are for the wrong reasons. The main objection should be it's making houses more expensive because it's going to increase demand. Okay, so I think that's something that we need to pay attention to. Bill Pulte. I couldn't think of the first name of the guy. Pulte went from the FH, Federal Housing Finance Agency head. His name is Bill Pulte. He's the one who was floating the idea of the portable mortgage and the 50-year mortgage. I think he's doing a lot. He's really, they've been talking about privatizing FHA and Freddie Mac, and we had meetings with Senator Jack Reed several years ago, myself and some other leaders at the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. And at the time, they were talking about they were working towards privatizing it, but he said in the end, and the final analysis, it's probably going to be quasi-privatized. So the government may still be involved to some extent. We'll see. Maybe it will be fully privatized. But, I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is that 30-year fixed rate mortgage is the one thing that has really supported home ownership in this country. And that really, is what keeps home ownership viable. Okay? So we don't want to necessarily privatize it, and of course, I'm a capitalist. I think I don't think the government should own businesses. I think everybody should go out and try and do what they have to do, but I don't think we should necessarily just privatize it. Okay, hold on. We have a caller right here. Hello, thank you for calling into the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. How are you? I can hear you fine. Yes.
On the internet, Joe, yesterday, I come across an article that 10 states are doing away or wanting to do away with property taxes altogether.
Well, property taxes are imposed and collected by municipalities, by cities and towns, not by the state, in most cases. Okay, so I don't know how a state would do that. But I would imagine if they say you're getting rid of property taxes, which are obviously paid for by property owners, and you're only going to raise revenue from sales taxes, the argument would be made that the people who do not own homes are subsidizing people who do own homes. Because the people who can't afford to buy a home are spending sales tax on food or whatever, gas, everything, and those taxes are being collected to pay for the expenses in cities and towns. So I would think that would be an argument against it. You know, property taxes, I think, again, I think everything is better when it's at the most local level possible. If it's regulation, if it's taxation, because I think the higher up it goes, there's more of an opportunity for graft. There's more of an opportunity for just people to do things nefariously. So the monies that are collected may not go, and it's from the sales taxes, may not go to the city of Woonsocket school department or roads or something like that. They may, oh, well, we've got to take off, we're collecting every dollar that we collect for sales taxes on this item, 2 cents is going to go towards this state issue or something else that will not help the people in that municipality. Another question is, okay, does it mean that only the sales taxes collected in Woonsocket go to the city of Woonsocket, or will sales taxes collected on the east side of Providence go to help people pay their property taxes in Burrillville? So I think there are a lot of issues there that they need to be fleshed out. I'm all in favor of looking at new ways to to generate taxes if it's more equitable and less onerous. I think one of the problems that we have, property taxes continue to go up, and we don't necessarily, look at here in Woonsocket, okay, several years ago, 70 cents of every dollar collected in taxes went to the pension. So that means you had 30 cents every time you paid property taxes. 30 cents of every dollar was going to cover all the other expenses, schools and everything else to run the city. That's just in one city. Imagine if the state were controlling those monies. Okay, who knows what kind of benefits they would be giving to their either state employees or to certain special interests. So go ahead. Sure. Well, they have property taxes. They don't have income taxes, or they're very low income taxes. So that's one of the things that's better. Now, a lot of times when states have low income tax, the property taxes are higher because in a state like Rhode Island, okay, property taxes are collected at the local level, and the state has taxes, and many times the state will pay monies to the municipalities for school departments, or there will be special grants for other parts to run the municipality. When you don't have those monies coming in, the municipalities have to have a higher property tax rate. So there are parts of Florida, I know in New Hampshire, where the property taxes are higher because they have low or no income tax being collected by the state. And then the other extreme, of course, is what you have in Connecticut, where they have high income tax, they have high property taxes because the state has been run so poorly for the past, almost a generation. Their unfunded pension liabilities were exorbitant. So houses in Connecticut are less expensive than houses in Rhode Island right now, but the property taxes are more. So it's kind of like pick your pain. I do. Yes. Yep. I Yeah, you know what? I will look into that, and get the answer and then talk about it next week on the show. I'll reach out to my colleagues in those states and find out how they handle this. Some of the things that they do. I was talking with some friends down in Florida, and what Florida has an interesting uh, I don't know what to call it, policy. So if you're a builder, you're developing land and you're building houses, you go to sell it, there are certain taxes that you pass on to the buyer of the home. So the municipality or the state says, okay, I'm just going to make up a number. For you to build this house, Mr. Developer, it's $8,000 tax. And the developer's like, okay, and what he'll do is he will offer financing to the buyers, okay, through a relationship he has with a bank. And that $8,000 tax gets paid by the buyer when they purchase the home. So it's levied against the developer, but paid by the buyer when the homes are sold. That's something I've never heard of, but it's very common in certain parts of Florida anyway. And so there are different things that people have to deal with, different challenges in different states. And it is interesting to hear how they deal with them, because that was something, that I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so um, that's a good point. I'm going to make a note to look into that. Other ways, creative ways that states. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Now I know in some places, like when you get out into states like Wyoming, I mean, many areas they don't even have building codes out there. So you own a piece of land, you want to build your house, and then you want to build, a garage in the back. You don't need to pull a permit or anything. You just build a garage. The unfortunate thing is if you don't build it right and it falls down, you may not be able to collect insurance on it. But yeah, they don't have like the strict building codes that we have here in the Northeast in particular. Well, in parts of the Northeast, I don't want to say, because even in New Hampshire there and Vermont and parts of Maine, their building codes are a little less strict than ours are. Federal taxes. Another excellent point. I'm sure the federal government would love that. That's something the National Association of Realtors lobbies literally every year. We lobby Congress to keep the mortgage interest and state tax deduction for homeowners. And if you look at how much money the government would collect in taxes if that were um, a taxable amount. So if that deduction did not exist, and you have 4 million people, and let's say they're only paying $10,000 in property taxes per year. Okay, so 4 million times 10,000, that is a lot of potential revenue that the government is missing out on. So that's why the government is always trying to change it. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to reach out to some of my realtor friends in those states and hear what their thoughts are and see if they can help me out with what the municipalities and the states do to maintain tax revenues. Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, yeah, no, thank you very much for calling in. That was a great series of questions. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, thank you very much for that call in. That was a very unique question. I never would have thought about that, and I will definitely try and get some answers for next week's show because, yeah, I mean, it's always worth looking at, thinking, as I call it, air quotes, outside the box, and looking at new ways to collect or pay taxes. All right, you know, I think we often forget that the Boston Tea Party was a bunch of Americans getting so annoyed with a tax that was only on tea. It wasn't an income tax, wasn't a property tax, wasn't an estate tax. It was tax on tea, and I think it was only like 2%. They got so ticked off, they threw all the tea in the Boston Harbor. All right. Today, if you add up all of the taxes that we pay, sales tax, income tax, property tax, all the late fees on taxes, excise taxes, inventory taxes, inheritance taxes, you know, the death tax as they call it. You know, you work hard, build something up, and you have an estate to pass on to your heirs, and you've got to pay, you know, 40% of every dollar in taxes. Many times, if there's no cash, the property has to be sold. So it's you know, not helping the family. These are things we need to get away from. Okay, we need to get away from these unnecessary taxes, and that's why I think we need to, I think, be a little patient and seeing what the tariffs are going to do, and if they're going to be able to continue to generate revenue and ultimately generate enough revenue to cut back on the taxes. So we don't need to collect taxes internally. They can be collected externally from other countries, okay? You know, people say, well, that only increases prices. Well, you know, if you look at the total amount of imports that we have, and you look at the amount of tariffs that are paid, the dollar amount is a fraction of what the consumers have to pay. Okay, it's a tiny amount that increases the price of the goods. It's only about, if my memory serves me, about 4%. Okay, which if you could cut your income taxes in half, or perhaps get rid of them just by paying 4% more for some items that are imported, I don't think that's such a bad idea. All right, folks, we are at the end, coming up to the end of the show. Coming up is Rick Mernier, the Old Time Preaching Ministry. Please stay tuned. Listen to some good some good scripture reading and interpretation. Shout out to Compass Title and Escrow. Thank you so much for sponsoring the show. And, of course, Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster Extraordinaire, 484-300-8495. That's 484-300-8495. We will be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and Anthony Betancourt will be our guest. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.